My ex-wife took everything in the divorce and left me homeless. My 12-year-old son said, "I've got this, Dad." Days later, she was in tears. "Hello. Thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel to help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. It would be great if you can also comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout-out in our next story. Today, our special shout-out goes to Corey Sanders from Walvis Bay. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's dive into the details of today's story. The rain didn't care who it hit. It came down in sheets, cold and relentless, drumming against the warped wooden slats of the park bench where I sat, hunched like some broken statue. My duffel bag, black, frayed at the straps, slumped beside me, soaked through, the last pitiful remnant of a life I used to know. Water ran in rivulets down my face, dripping off my chin, but I didn't bother wiping it away. What was the point? The world had already washed me out to sea, and I was drowning, slow and quiet, right there in the middle of this nowhere town. I could still hear her voice, Lydia's, cutting through the static of my memory like a blade. "He's unstable, Your Honor. A liability. I did what I had to for our son." That courtroom, with its stale air and the judge's gavel cracking down like thunder, played on a loop in my head. She'd stood there, all prim in her navy blazer, her blonde hair pulled tight, not a strand out of place, while I sat across the aisle, my cheap suit wrinkled, my hands shaking. She'd lied through her teeth, every word a polished bullet aimed at what was left of me. The house? Hers. The savings? Hers. Ethan, my boy, my 12-year-old shadow? Hers too, mostly, except for the scraps of weekends she tossed me like table crumbs. And me? I got this bench, this rain, this bag stuffed with a couple shirts, a toothbrush, and a photo of Ethan I couldn't bear to look at yet. The flashback hit me hard, unbidden, pulling me back to that last day in the house. I'd been hauling boxes to the curb, my breath fogging in the crisp fall air, when I caught Ethan's silhouette in the upstairs window. He didn't wave, didn't call out, just watched, his small hands pressed to the glass, his brown eyes wide and unreadable. Lydia had yanked him away, her voice sharp through the screen. "Get back, Ethan, now." I'd wanted to smash that window, climb up, grab him, and run. But I didn't. I'd walked away, the gravel crunching under my boots, her victory ringing in my ears as the moving truck rumbled off with everything I'd built. Now, here I was, the rain a dull roar, the streetlights flickering like they were as tired as I was. My fingers tightened around the duffel strap, the wet canvas biting into my palm. How'd it come to this? 15 years with her, 15 years of late shifts at the garage, of Ethan's soccer games, of barbecues in the backyard, and she'd torched it all with a smile and a signature. I could still see the judge's face, weathered and bored, as he handed down the ruling. Custody to the mother, assets divided as presented. Divided my ass. She took it all, left me with nothing but the echo of her laugh as I signed the papers. I stood, my knees creaking, and slung the bag over my shoulder. The weight of it pulled at me, but I trudged forward, boots sloshing through puddles that mirrored the gray sky. The motel was a half-mile off, a neon sign blinking through the haze. Vacancy. Cheap. Dirty. Mine for the night if I could scrape together the $30. My wallet was thin, the last 20 crumpled and damp, but I'd figure it out. I always did. That's what I told myself, anyway, as the wind howled past, tugging at my jacket like it wanted to rip me apart too. The clerk at the motel didn't look up when I walked in, just slid a key across the counter, his cigarette smoke curling up to the stained ceiling. Room 12. The door creaked when I pushed it open, revealing a sagging bed, a chipped nightstand, and a TV that probably hadn't worked since the 90s. The air smelled of mildew and regret, but it was dry, and that was enough. I dropped the bag, peeled off my soaked jacket, and sank onto the mattress, springs groaning under me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a faint lifeline to the world I'd lost. Ethan's name lit up the screen, and my chest tightened. His last visit, 3 days ago, flashed back, vivid as the rain outside. He'd sat across from me at the diner, picking at his fries, his sneakers scuffing the floor. "She's different now, Dad," he'd said, voice low, like he was testing the words. "Bossy. Mean, sometimes." I nodded, sipping burnt coffee, trying to keep the bitterness out of my tone. She won, Ethan. That's what winning does to some people. He looked up then, his eyes sharp, too old for a kid his age. I've got this, Dad, he'd said, firm, like a promise. I chuckled, ruffled his hair, figured it was just him trying to cheer me up. But the way he'd held my gaze, it stuck with me, a splinter I couldn't pull out. I swiped the screen to read his message again, the one that had come through an hour ago while I was still on that bench, too numb to check it. Can't talk long. She's watching me. See you soon. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but what could I say? Hang in there, bud. I'm a wreck, but I love you. I let the phone fall to the bed, my head tipping back against the wall. He was 12, for God's sake. What could he do against her? She'd steamroll him like she'd steamrolled me, and I'd be stuck here, powerless, listening to the drip of the faucet like it was counting down my last seconds. The rain pounded harder outside, a fist against the window, and I shut my eyes, willing the noise to drown out the ache. I'd lost everything. My home, my pride, my boy's daily laugh echoing through the halls. Lydia had played her game and won, left me here in this hole with nothing but ghosts. But Ethan's words kept circling back, a lifeline I didn't dare grab yet. I've got this, Dad. A kid's hope, or something more. I didn't know. I couldn't know. Not yet. Then the phone buzzed again, jolting me upright. Another text from Ethan, short and sharp, slicing through the haze. Mom's acting weird. I'll figure it out. My breath caught, a spark flaring in the dark pit of my chest. Weird how? Figure what out? I typed fast, fingers clumsy on the cracked screen. You okay? Tell me more. But the dots didn't come. No reply. Just silence, thick and heavy, pressing in around me. I stared at the words. The rain a distant roar now, my pulse thudding in my ears. Something was shifting, something I couldn't see yet, like a storm brewing just over the horizon. Ethan was up to something. I felt it, deep in my bones. And whatever it was about to change everything. I just didn't know how much it had cost us both. I couldn't shake the image of Ethan's text lighting up that dim motel room. Mom's acting weird. I'll figure it out. It gnawed at me, a jagged little splinter lodged in my skull as I lay on that lumpy mattress, the rain a fading drumbeat outside. What did he mean, weird? Lydia was a lot of things, cold, calculating, a snake in heels. But weird? That wasn't her style. She was too controlled, too polished, every move a chess play to keep me checkmated. And Ethan, my boy, caught in her web. What the hell was he figuring out? I didn't have answers, just the echo of his words and a gnawing ache that kept me tossing until dawn bruised the sky purple. Across town, in the house that used to be mine, Ethan was living it. That place, our place, had been a sanctuary once. I'd built the deck out back with my own hands, sweat dripping into the wood grain. Ethan toddling around with a plastic hammer, giggling. Now it was hers, Lydia's kingdom, redecorated with slick leather couches and glass coffee tables that screamed money. Money she'd bled from me. I could picture it through Ethan's eyes, the old oak floors we'd sanded together now gleaming under her designer rugs. The walls I'd painted a soft blue swapped for some trendy gray she probably saw in a magazine. It wasn't home anymore. It was a stage, and she was the star, strutting around like she'd earned it all. Ethan didn't belong there, not really. I could feel it, even miles away, that he was out of place amid her new toys. He'd be in his room, still up on the second floor, I bet, with the slanted ceiling and the window overlooking the yard, his sneakers scuffing the carpet, his comics stacked on the shelf I'd bolted to the wall. But the air would be different now, heavier, laced with her perfume and her rules. I imagined him lying awake that night, same as me, the house creaking around him like it was whispering secrets it couldn't keep. And it was. Late that night, while I was staring at the motel's peeling wallpaper, Ethan heard it, the first crack in her perfect facade. He told me later how it went down, his voice low and quick over the phone, like he was still afraid she'd catch him. He'd been up past midnight, restless, the glow of his handheld game flickering under the blanket, when her voice sliced through the stillness. Not loud, just sharp, smug, drifting up from the living room below. He'd crept to the top of the stairs, socks silent on the hardwood, and crouched there, peering through the banister like a spy in one of his comics. She was on the phone, pacing, her heels clicking against the floor I'd laid myself. "Yeah, it's done," she'd said, her tone dripping with that self-satisfied edge I knew too well. "Mark's got nothing left, screwed him good this time. The money's safe, don't worry. He'll never find it." Ethan's breath hitched. He told me that part, how his chest tightened like a fist was squeezing it. The money's safe. What money? The savings she'd sworn were drained? The house she'd claimed was underwater? My boy's mind raced, piecing it together faster than I ever could have, and something clicked in him right then, a switch flipping from kid to hunter. He didn't tell me that night, of course. I was still in the dark, pacing that motel room, picturing him asleep under the quilt his grandma made, not crouched like a shadow, listening to his mother bury me deeper. But he watched her after that, eyes sharp, tracking her like she was prey. Over the next few days, he caught the signs I'd missed for years. She'd slip out to the garage late, meeting some guy, tall, wiry, with a leather jacket and a voice like gravel. Ethan peeked through the blinds once, saw cash change hands, thick stacks of it, her fingers brushing the guys as she smirked. He found more in her room, a drawer stuffed with envelopes, bills spilling out like dirty laundry she didn't care to hide. She thought he was just a kid, too dumb to notice, too small to matter. She was wrong. I didn't know any of this yet, but I felt the shift in my gut, a restless churn that kept me up as the days dragged on. Ethan's text had lit a fuse, and I kept checking my phone, waiting for the next spark. I'd walk the town's empty streets, past the hardware store where I used to grab nails for the deck, past the diner where Ethan and I'd split milkshakes, my boots kicking gravel as I replayed his words. Mom's acting weird. Was she unraveling? Slipping up? I wanted to believe it, wanted to think she'd trip over her own arrogance, but I'd seen her play this game too long. She didn't lose. Not to me, not to anyone. Back at the house, Ethan's suspicions were hardening into something solid, something dangerous. He told me how it built up. How he'd linger in the hall, pretending to tie his shoe, catching snatches of her calls. "Move it faster," she'd hiss, or "He's too broke to fight back now." Each word was a shovel, digging her grave deeper, and Ethan was the one holding the map. But she wasn't blind. That Saturday, he pushed too close. He'd been hovering near her room, the door cracked, her voice a low murmur inside, something about the account and offshore. His shadow must have flickered, because she spun around, eyes narrowing like a hawk's. "Ethan." Her snap was a whip crack, loud enough to make him flinch. She stormed over, her silk robe swishing, and loomed in the doorway, all 5'8" of her radiating ice. "What are you doing?" "Mind your own damn business." Her voice was venom, but her gaze darted, nervous, maybe, like he'd rattled her cage. He mumbled something about looking for his charger, shuffled off, heart pounding so hard he thought she'd hear it. She didn't follow, just slammed the door, the lock clicking like a gunshot. That was the moment, he told me later, the moment he decided he couldn't just watch anymore. She was hiding something big, something that could turn this whole mess upside down, and he wasn't going to let her bury it. I didn't know it then. Didn't feel the earth shifting under me as I sat in that motel, staring at a ceiling stained with God knows what. But Ethan did. He went back to his room, pulled his phone from his desk, and hatched a plan. Next call she made, he'd be ready. He'd hide it, under a pile of laundry, maybe. That ratty hoodie she always nagged him to wash might pointed her way, recording every word. I was still out there, clueless, the rain a memory now, the air thick with motel damp. But my boy was stepping into the fight, fists clenched, eyes blazing. He didn't text me that night, didn't tip me off. He just set the trap, quiet as a ghost, and waited. And me? I felt it anyway, a tremor, faint but real, like the ground was about to crack wide open. The motel room was starting to feel like a coffin, walls closing in, air thick with damp rot, the hum of the busted heater my only company. I'd stare at my phone, waiting for Ethan to ping me again, that last text, "Mom's acting weird." I'll figure it out, burning a hole in my brain. Days had passed since then, each one stretching longer than the last, and the silence from him was a weight I couldn't shake. Across town, in that house I'd poured my soul into, something was brewing. I didn't know what, but I could feel it, a storm gathering in the dark, and my boy was right in the eye of it. Ethan told me later how it all went down that night, his voice hushed and fast over a crackling line, like he was still hiding from her. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of stillness that presses on your ears until you hear your own heartbeat. Lydia had been on edge all day, snapping at him over breakfast, her eyes darting like she was chasing shadows. He kept his head down, played the good son, but he was watching her closer than ever. That pile of laundry in the hall, his hoodie, some socks, a tangled mess, had his phone buried in it, screen off, mic hot, ready to catch her next move. He'd set it up after that last run-in, when she'd caught him lurking near her room and hissed at him to butt out. He wasn't butting out anymore. He told me that, how it hit him like a punch, the truth spilling out in her casual venom. She'd bribed someone. She'd hidden money, our money, and laughed about it while I slept on park benches. He didn't move, didn't breathe, just let the phone drink it in, every damning syllable piling up like bullets in a clip. I wasn't there, couldn't see it, but I can picture him now, my boy, 12 years old, crouched in the dark, his jaw tight, eyes blazing with something fiercer than fear. He was building a weapon, and he knew it. Downstairs, Lydia kept going, oblivious, her arrogance a shield she thought nothing could pierce. "He's done," she said, "a ghost now. Let him rot." The call ended with a click, her heels fading as she moved to the kitchen, probably pouring herself a glass of that overpriced wine she'd started buying with my blood money. Ethan waited, counting the seconds, his pulse a drum in his ears. He slipped into the hall, silent as a cat, and fished the phone from the laundry pile, hands trembling as he stopped the recording. He didn't listen to it then, couldn't, not with her still prowling below, but he knew he had her. He darted back to his room, plugged it into his laptop, and uploaded it to some cloud drive he'd set up for school projects. Smart kid. Smarter than me, that's for damn sure. He just clicked sync when the floorboard creaked outside his door, loud as a gunshot in that tense quiet. She was there before he could react, Lydia, bursting in like a storm front, her face twisted with something wild. "What are you doing up?" she snapped, eyes narrowing as they landed on the phone, its screen glowing traitorously in the dark. He fumbled, tried to shove it under his pillow, but she was too fast, lunging across the room with a snarl. "Give me that." Her nails scraped his wrist as she yanked it free, the light catching her flushed cheeks, her pupils pinpricks of fury. She swiped through it, saw the recorder app still open, and her breath hissed out like steam. "You little sneak, what is this?" Ethan froze, his voice stuck, but she didn't wait for an answer. She stabbed at the screen, deleted the file, her lips curling into a triumphant sneer. "Think you're clever, huh? You're grounded. 2 weeks, no phone, no nothing. And you're not seeing your father till I say so." She towered over him, clutching the phone like a trophy, her victory ringing in the silence. Ethan just stared, his chest heaving, but inside he was grinning. I know it, because he told me later, that quiet fire in his voice. She thought she'd won, thought she'd crushed it. She didn't know he'd backed it up, that her confession was safe, floating somewhere in the ether, out of her reach. I didn't feel that triumph, not then. I was still in that motel, pacing a groove in the carpet, my phone mockingly silent. Ethan was cut off, her band slamming down like a prison gate, and I didn't even know why. I tried texting him that morning, a simple "you good, bud?" but it sat there, unread, a dead end. My imagination ran wild, her yelling at him scared, alone in that house, turned fortress. I punched the wall, knuckles stinging, the plaster cracking under my fist. She was tightening her grip, and I was stuck out here, helpless, a dog chained to a post while she toyed with us both. Ethan didn't break, though. He played her game, kept his head down at breakfast, shoveled cereal into his mouth, while she smirked across the table, thinking she'd caged him. But he was plotting. School was his lifeline, the one place she couldn't follow. Monday morning, he slipped a note to his buddy Jake in the hall, scribbled on a torn notebook page. "Tell Dad I need to see him. It's big." Jake nodded, wide-eyed, and Ethan watched him stuff it in his pocket, a flicker of hope cutting through the dread. He didn't know if it'd work, didn't know if I'd get it, but it was all he had. A flare shot into the dark, praying I'd see the smoke. Back in that motel, I didn't hear the flare yet. I just felt the weight, heavier every hour, my boy slipping further away. I sat on the edge of the bed, head in my hands, the faucet dripping like a countdown. She locked him down, cut me out, and I couldn't fight what I couldn't see. But Ethan, he was fighting. He'd caught her, recorded her, outsmarted her, and that note was speeding toward me, a blade aimed at her throne. I didn't know it then, but the evidence was alive, and it was about to blow this whole damn thing wide open. The diner sat on the edge of town like a forgotten relic, its neon sign buzzing open 24 hours in a sickly yellow glow that flickered against the night. Gravel crunched under my boots as I paced the lot, the air sharp with late-fall chill, my breath fogging in front of me. It was past midnight, the world asleep except for me, and the ghosts rattling around in my head. Ethan's silence had been a knife twisting deeper each day. No texts, no calls, just the void where my boy used to be. Then, out of nowhere, Jake, the scrappy kid from down the street, had tracked me down at the motel that afternoon, shoving a crumpled note into my hand. From Ethan, he'd muttered, then bolted like he'd handed me a live grenade. Meet me at the diner. Midnight. It's big. I'd been there an hour already, nerves strung tight, my eyes scanning the dark stretch of road beyond the greasy windows. The waitress, some tired woman with a name tag that said Barb, kept refilling my coffee, the black sludge bitter on my tongue, but I barely tasted it. My hands gripped the mug, knuckles white, the heat seeping into my palms like it could burn away the dread. What was big? What had Lydia done now? She'd locked him down, cut me off, grounded him, probably, just to spite me. But that note, scrawled in his messy handwriting, had a weight to it, a promise I couldn't ignore. He was coming. He had to. The bell above the door jingled, sharp and sudden, snapping me out of my spiral. There he was, Ethan, my Ethan, slipping in like a shadow, hoodie yanked up over his head, sneakers muddy from cutting through the woods. His eyes found mine across the room, wide and bright, and my chest cracked open, relief flooding in so fast it hurt. He darted to my booth, sliding in across from me, his breath quick and ragged. "Dad," he whispered, voice trembling but steady. I got out. "She doesn't know." "Jesus, kid," I rasped, reaching across to grab his hand, squeezing it hard. His skin was cold, his fingers small but tough, and I held on like he'd vanish if I let go. "You okay? What the hell's going on?" He didn't answer right away, just dug into his pocket and pulled out a USB drive, small and black, sliding it across the table like it was gold. "Listen to this," he said, his gaze locking on mine, fierce and urgent. "It's her. Everything." I stared at it, that tiny thing, my heart thudding against my ribs. "What did you do, Ethan?" My voice was low, almost afraid to ask, but he didn't flinch, just leaned closer, his words tumbling out in a rush. "She was on the phone, Dad. I recorded it. She admitted it all, bribing the witness, hiding the money. She thought she deleted it, but I backed it up. It's all here." His eyes shone, a mix of pride and fear, and I felt the ground tilt under me, the diner spinning as I processed it. I fumbled for my earbuds, plugged them into my phone, and jammed the USB into an adapter I kept in my pocket, old mechanic habit, always carrying junk that might come in handy. Ethan watched, silent, as I hit play. Her voice, Lydia's, slithered into my ears, smooth and venomous, and it was like a fist slamming into my gut. Paid off that witness myself, $5,000 to say Mark was a loose cannon. And the assets? Tucked away nice and tight. He's too broke to dig. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached, fury boiling up hot and fast, but I couldn't stop listening. She laughed, that cold, cutting laugh I'd heard 1,000 times, and every word was a nail in her coffin. "He's done. Let him rot." The recording cut off, and I yanked the earbuds out, my hands shaking, breath sawing through my lungs. Ethan stared at me, waiting, his face pale but set. "She did that." I growled, voice rough as gravel. "She paid someone to lie?" He nodded, slow, like he was handing me a loaded gun. "Yeah, Dad. And there's more cash in her room. Meetings with some guy. She's got secrets, big ones." I leaned back, the vinyl seat creaking, my mind racing 100 miles an hour. Fury clawed at me, red hot, blinding, but under it was something colder, sharper, disbelief turning to resolve. She'd played me, stripped me bare, and laughed while I bled. But Ethan, he'd caught her. My 12-year-old kid had outsmarted her, risked everything to drag her into the light. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the man he was becoming, brave, smart, mine. "You're a damn hero, you know that?" I said, voice cracking. He ducked his head, a shy grin flickering, but his eyes were still scared. I just want it fixed, Dad. I'm kind of freaked out. I reached over, pulled him into a rough hug across the table, his hoodie bunched under my grip. You don't have to be scared alone, I said against his hair. We're in this together now. He nodded into my shoulder, and for a minute, it was just us, father and son, the world outside fading to static. But the USB burned in my pocket, a ticking bomb, and I knew what came next. I couldn't do it alone, not this time. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to Tina's number, my old lawyer buddy from back when I had a life worth fighting for. She picked up on the second ring, her voice groggy but snapping awake when she heard mine. Mark? What's up? You sound like hell. I didn't waste time. I've got something proof Lydia rigged the divorce. Bribes, hidden assets, all of it on tape. Can you take her down? There was a pause, then a low, fierce laugh. You're kidding. Tell me you're not kidding. I've been itching to nail that witch since day one. Send it over. I'm in. Ethan watched, his knee bouncing under the table, as I emailed the file to Tina right there, the diner's weak Wi-Fi chugging along. She's good, right? He asked, voice small. She'll win. I nodded, fierce. She's a pit bull kid. And with this? Lydia's toast. He exhaled, tension easing, but his eyes still darted to the window, like he expected her to storm in any second. She's gonna be mad, Dad. Really mad. Let her be, I said, my voice steel now, the victim in me burning away. She started this war. We're ending it. The coffee sat cold between us, the diner quiet except for Barb clinking dishes behind the counter. Tina texted back, got it. Holy crap, this is dynamite. Meet me tomorrow, 9 a.m. And I felt the shift, the tide turning, my hands itching to tear down everything Lydia had built on my ruins. Ethan yawned, exhaustion hitting him hard, and I knew he had to get back before she noticed. Go, I said, reluctant but firm. Lay low. I'll handle it from here. He nodded, slipped out of the booth, then paused. Love you, Dad. My throat tightened. Love you too, bud. More than anything. He vanished into the night, a shadow swallowed by the dark, and I sat there, the USB a weight against my chest, my mind already on the fight ahead. Tina called again as I stepped into the lot, her voice crackling through. Mark, this is gold, but it'll get ugly. She'll fight dirty. You know she will. You ready? I stopped, the wind biting at my face, and grinned into the shadows. Yeah, Tina. I'm ready. Let's bury her. Tina's office was a war zone of paper and grit, tucked above a hardware store on Main Street, the kind of place that smelled like stale coffee and determination. I sat there that morning after the diner, the USB burning a hole in my pocket, watching her tear into Lydia's world like a hound off the leash. The desk was a mess, files stacked crooked, pins rolling off the edge, a laptop humming under a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like a trapped fly. She had that look in her eye, the one I remembered from law school days. Wild, focused, like a kid unwrapping a present she knew was going to blow up in someone's face. This recording, she said, spinning her chair to face me, it's the damn Rosetta Stone, Mark. We're going to decode her whole scam. I leaned back in the creaky chair, arms crossed, the weight of the last few weeks still pressing on my chest. Just tell me we've got her, Tina. I need this over. She grinned, sharp and feral, tapping a stack of printouts. Oh, we've got her. That bribe she bragged about? $5,000 to some sleaze named Carter. He's on the witness list from the divorce. I cross-checked her bank records, public ones, for now, and there's a withdrawal that matches. Same day he testified you were a nutcase. But it gets better. She slid a page my way, numbers circled in red. Unreported income, big chunks, wired from some shell company. And guess what? She's been meeting a guy, a leather jacket, shady as hell. Ethan saw him, right? Yeah, I said, voice rough, picturing my boy's wide eyes as he'd whispered about the cash, the garage, that creep. He's been watching her close. Tina nodded, scribbling a note. Smart kid. I'm digging deeper, subpoenas are next. Offshore accounts, dummy corporations, she's been playing fast and loose, thinking you'd never fight back. I clenched my fists, the old anger flaring hot. She thought wrong. Back at her house, Lydia didn't know it yet, but the walls were closing in. I could imagine her that day, sipping her wine, flipping through some glossy catalog, still smug in her victory. Ethan was at school, safe for now, but she'd be pacing soon enough, that perfect mask slipping. Tina worked fast. By noon, she had a private investigator buddy sniffing around Lydia's finances, pulling threads I didn't even know existed. Every call, every email, was another shovel of dirt on her grave. I stayed in that office till dusk, the light fading through the smudged window, my pulse a steady drumbeat as the case took shape. This wasn't just about the house or the money anymore. It was about tearing down every lie she'd built to crush me. Word travels fast in a small town, though, and Lydia had ears everywhere. I should have known she'd get wind of something. It was late that night when it happened. Me back at the motel, sprawled on the bed, the TV flickering static because the cable was shot. A knock rattled the door, hard and insistent, and my gut twisted. I swung my legs off, boots hitting the floor, and yanked it open, half expecting a drunk neighbor or the clerk chasing rent. But there she was, Lydia, standing in the doorway like a storm cloud rolling in, her blonde hair loose and wild, her coat pulled tight against the wind. "What the hell are you up to, Mark?" Her voice was a hiss, venom dripping from every word, her eyes glinting in the motel's sickly light. She stepped in uninvited, heels clicking on the chipped linoleum, her perfume cutting through the mildew stink. "You think you can crawl back from the gutter and take me down? I hear you're sniffing around, talking to lawyers. You're nothing, just a broke loser with a grudge." She loomed close, her finger jabbing at my chest, and I felt the old fear flicker, the one she'd planted deep, that I'd never be enough. But this time, it didn't stick. I straightened, towered over her, my shadow swallowing hers against the wall. "You're scared," I said, low and steady, letting the words sink in. "I can smell it on you. What's the matter, Lydia? Worried someone found your dirty little secrets?" Her face twitched, a crack in the ice, and I pressed harder, voice dropping to a growl. "I've got proof, more than you can bury this time. You're done playing queen." She froze, just for a second, her breath catching, and I saw it panic, raw and real, flickering behind those cold blue eyes. She recovered fast, though, tossing her hair back with a laugh that sounded forced. "Proof? You're bluffing. You've got nothing, and I'll ruin you all over again, Ethan too, if I have to. Stay in your lane, Mark, or I'll bury you so deep you'll wish you'd stayed on that park bench." She spun on her heel, storming out, the door slamming so hard the frame shook, her threat hanging in the air like smoke. I stood there, heart pounding, the adrenaline buzzing through me. She was rattled. I'd seen it, felt it, and that was power I hadn't tasted in months. She didn't know what I had, not yet, but she knew something was coming. I paced the room, the carpet worn thin under my boots, replaying her words, her twitch, the way her voice had hitched. She'd fight dirty, just like she promised, but I wasn't the pushover she'd left behind. Not anymore. Next morning, I met Ethan at the school gate. He'd texted from a friend's phone, quick and cryptic. "Need to see you? Lunch break." He jogged over, backpack bouncing, his face pale but his jaw set. "She's freaking out, Dad," he said, voice a whisper as we ducked behind the bleachers, away from prying eyes. "Last night, after she got back, she was yelling on the phone, something about moving stuff, fast. She kept looking at me weird, like she knows I'm up to something." He swallowed, eyes darting. "She's scared, Dad." I saw it in her eyes, real scared. I gripped his shoulder, firm but gentle, feeling the tremor in him. "You're doing good, bud. Better than good. She's scared because we're closing in, she can feel the noose tightening." He nodded, a faint smile breaking through, and I pulled him into a quick hug, his hair tickling my chin. "Tina's on it," I said. "We've got her cornered. Just hang tight." He stepped back, resolute, and slipped away as the bell rang, leaving me standing there, the wind whistling through the empty stands. Back at Tina's, she was a whirlwind, more dirt piling up, bank statements flagged, a paper trail leading to shady deals Lydia couldn't explain away. "She's toast," Tina said, grinning over her coffee mug. "Court's in a week. We'll hit her with everything." I nodded, the fire in me stoked high, but Ethan's whisper echoed louder than her words. "She's scared. Good. Let her squirm. Let her feel the walls she'd built start to crumble." I was ready for war now, every muscle coiled, every breath a vow. Lydia thought she'd broken me, but she'd forged something stronger, a father, a fighter, a man with nothing left to lose. And soon, she'd see just how dirty I could fight back. The courtroom smelled like old wood and nervous sweat. a stale mix that clung to the back of my throat as I sat there, hands clasped tight on the table. The place was stark, bare walls, high ceilings, rows of benches packed with onlookers who'd caught wind of the storm about to break. Their whispers buzzed like static, a low hum under the fluorescent lights that cast harsh shadows across the floor. I could feel their eyes on me, Mark, the washed-up mechanic, the guy Lydia had left for dead. But today wasn't about pity. Today was reckoning, and I was ready to watch her empire burn. Ethan sat beside me, his small frame rigid in a borrowed button-up that hung loose on his shoulders. His knee bounced under the table, but his face was stone, my boy, 12 years old and tougher than I'd ever been. Tina flanked my other side, her briefcase open, papers spilling out like ammunition. She'd been up all night, eyes red but blazing, her voice a steady growl as she'd prepped me. We've got her dead to rights, Mark. Just stay cool and let me swing. I nodded now, my jaw tight, the USB in my pocket, a live wire against my leg. Across the aisle, Lydia sat prim and perfect, navy blazer, hair pinned back, that smug tilt to her lips like she still owned the world. She didn't look at me, just stared ahead, her lawyer whispering in her ear, a slick guy in a suit that cost more than my truck. The judge banged his gavel, a sharp crack that silenced the room, and my pulse kicked up a notch. He was a grizzled old bastard, face creased like leather, eyes sharp behind wire rims. Let's get this moving, he rasped, flipping through the file. Petition to revisit the divorce settlement, claims of fraud. Counsel, you're up. Tina stood, smoothing her jacket, and I felt the air shift game on. Lydia's lawyer went first, all smooth talk and swagger, painting her as the victim. Your Honor, this is a desperate grab by Mr. Dawson, a man with no evidence, no standing, just sour grapes after a fair ruling. He smirked my way, and I gripped the table edge, wood biting into my palms, but Tina squeezed my arm. Wait. Then it was her turn. She strode forward, voice clear and cutting, laying out the case like a hunter skinning prey. We're not here for grapes, Your Honor. We're here for justice. Lydia Dawson committed fraud, bribed a witness, hid assets, manipulated this court. And we've got proof. The room hushed, a collective breath held, and Lydia's smirk faltered, just a twitch at the corner of her mouth. Tina held up the USB, small but mighty, and plugged it into the courtroom's audio system. With your permission, I'd like to play Exhibit A. The judge nodded, leaning forward, and my heart slammed against my ribs as she hit play. Lydia's voice filled the space, cool, cruel, unmistakable, echoing off the walls like a ghost come to haunt her. Paid off that witness myself, $5,000 to say Mark was a loose cannon. And the assets? Tucked away nice and tight. He's too broke to dig. That laugh, her damn laugh, cut through, and the crowd gasped, a ripple of shock spreading fast. I watched her, couldn't look away. Her face drained white, eyes darting to her lawyer, then back to the speakers as her own words buried her. He's done. Let him rot. The recording clicked off, silence crashing in, thick and heavy. Tina didn't pause, pounced right in. That's her confessing. Your Honor. We've got bank records, withdrawals matching the bribe, offshore accounts she never disclosed. She rigged the divorce, stole from my client, and thought she'd get away with it. She slapped down the evidence, printouts, statements, a paper trail of deceit, and stepped back, victorious. Lydia's lawyer floundered, scrambling to his feet, voice high and shaky. This is inadmissible. Edited, coerced, unreliable. The judge cut him off, hand raised, eyes narrowing. Sit down, counsel. I've heard enough. He turned to Lydia, who'd gone rigid, her hands clenched in her lap. Mrs. Dawson, you care to explain why I shouldn't hold you in contempt right now? She opened her mouth, lips trembling, but nothing came, just a choking sound, her mask cracking wide open. The room spun as the judge leaned back, gavel hovering. I've seen a lot in this court, but this takes the cake. Divorce settlements voided, fraud nullifies it all. House, assets, custody, reverted to Mr. Dawson, effective immediately. Mrs. Dawson, you're looking at perjury charges, maybe worse. We'll sort that later. The gavel slammed down, a thunderclap, and the crowd erupted, murmurs, gasps, a few claps I didn't expect. My chest heaved, air rushing in, the weight of months lifting so fast I almost staggered. Lydia broke then, really broke. She shot up, chair scraping, tears streaming down her face as she turned to the judge, then me, her voice a ragged sob. You can't do this. I had to. He was falling apart. It was for Ethan, excuses, weak and wet, spilling out as her lawyer tugged at her arm, hissing for her to shut up. She shook him off, mascara streaking, and for the first time, I saw her, not the queen, not the viper, just a woman drowning in her own mess. I didn't feel sorry, though. Not a damn bit. She'd made her bed, and I'd just yanked the sheets out from under her. Ethan's hand found mine under the table, small and warm, and I looked at him, his eyes shining, a quiet nod passing between us. No words, just that connection, stronger than steel. We'd done it together. Tina clapped my shoulder, grinning wide. Told you, Mark. Toast. I managed a laugh, rough and real, the first in God knows how long. The bailiff moved in, stern and brisk, guiding Lydia toward the side door as the crowd thinned out. She was a wreck, sobbing, hair falling loose, her lawyer trailing like a kick dog. But as she passed me, she stopped, head snapping up, eyes locking on mine. They were red, wet, but burning with something dark, hate, maybe, or desperation. Her voice came low, a mutter through gritted teeth. Meant just for me. You'll regret this. The bailiff tugged her along, and she was gone, swallowed by the hall, her threat hanging like smoke in the air. I stood, Ethan beside me, the courtroom emptying out, leaving just the echo of her words and the weight of our win. Regret? Maybe she'd try something. I wouldn't put it past her, but right then, I didn't care. The house was mine again, the money, my boy, all of it back where it belonged. I slung an arm around Ethan's shoulders, his grin mirroring mine, and we walked out into the crisp air, the sun breaking through clouds like it was cheering us on. She'd lost everything, and I'd taken it back with both hands. Let her whisper her threats. I was done being afraid. The house smelled like home again, like cedar from the old floors, like the faint tang of oil I'd tracked in from the garage years ago, like us. I stood in the living room that first evening back, the reclaimed keys still heavy in my pocket, and let the quiet sink in. No more motel damp, no more diner coffee, no more park benches, just these walls, ours again, humming with a life Lydia couldn't steal twice. The leather couches she bought were gone, hauled off by the movers Tina had sicked on her, and the space felt raw, empty, but right. Ethan's sneakers squeaked on the hardwood as he dragged a box in from the truck, his grin lighting up the dusk filtering through the blinds. Check it out, Dad, he called, ripping tape off the cardboard, pulling out a chipped mug I'd used every morning before she torched our world. Still got the coffee stains. I laughed, rough and real, crossing the room to take it from him. My fingers traced the faded world's okayest dad scrawl, his gift from a Father's Day when he was 8, and something in my chest loosened, a knot I hadn't known was still tied. Guess we're starting with the essentials, I said, setting it on the counter, the kitchen glowing soft under the old pendant light I'd hung myself. We unpacked slow, piece by piece, like we were stitching the past back together. His comics went on the shelf I'd bolted up in his room, the one she'd threatened to rip down just to spite me. My toolbox clattered into the garage, the metal echoing off the concrete, a sound I'd missed more than I'd admit. Ethan darted between rooms, hauling stuff with a kid's energy, his voice bouncing off the walls. Where's the TV remote? Found my old soccer ball. And I followed, slower, letting each step root me deeper. The air was warm now, the furnace rumbling to life after I'd kicked it back on, chasing out the chill she'd left behind. Night fell soft outside, the crickets picking up where the daylight left off, and we ended up on the floor, pizza boxes open between us, grease staining the cardboard. Ethan chewed a slice, pepperoni dangling, his eyes distant for a sec before he spoke, voice low. Dad, I should have done it sooner. The recording, watching her. If I'd figured it out faster, you wouldn't have. He stopped, swallowing hard, guilt shadowing his face, and my gut twisted. 12 years old, and he was carrying that? I set my slice down, wiped my hands on my jeans, and leaned in, voice steady but soft. Hey, look at me. He did, reluctant, his brown eyes flickering with doubt. You didn't just figure it out, Ethan. You fixed it. You're the reason we're here, eating this lousy pizza, laughing again. I was lost, but gone, and you pulled me back. Don't you dare feel bad for that. His lip quivered, just a twitch, and he nodded, fast, like he was shoving the weight off. Yeah? He asked, small but hopeful. Yeah, I said, firm, reaching over to grip his shoulder. You're the damn hero of this story. Don't forget it. He grinned then, shy but real, and grabbed another slice, the tension melting into the hum of the house around us. We ate in silence for a bit, the kind that didn't need filling, just the crackle of the box and the faint tick of the clock on the wall. I watched him, my boy, sprawled out like he owned the place, because he did, now, same as me, and felt something settle, a peace I hadn't known since before her claws sank in. This was ours. We'd fought for it, bled for it, and won it back. The TV flickered on later, some late-night news anchor droning through the quiet, and then her name hit the air, Lydia Dawson. Ethan's head snapped up, pizza forgotten, as the screen flashed her face older, somehow, in that grainy courtroom shot, her eyes hollow. Breaking news, the anchor said, voice clipped. Local woman faces fraud and perjury charges after a bombshell hearing today. Evidence of bribery and hidden assets has stripped her of a multi-million-dollar divorce settlement. Sources say she's lost everything: home, savings, even custody of her son. The shot cut to her leaving the courthouse, head down, hair a mess, reporters swarming like vultures as she shoved past. Ethan let out a breath, slow and shaky. She's really gone, huh? I nodded, eyes on the screen as they looped the clip, her stumbling, her lawyer nowhere in sight. Yeah, bud. She's done. The anchor kept going, charges pending, assets seized, a fall so hard she'd hit rock bottom, and kept digging. I didn't cheer, didn't gloat, just watched, a cold satisfaction settling in my bones. She'd lost it all, just like I had, but I climbed out. She wouldn't. Later, after Ethan crashed on the couch, the TV off and the house dark, I stepped onto the deck I'd built, the wood creaking under my boots. The night was still, stars punching through the black, and I leaned on the railing, breathing deep. Revenge wasn't what I'd expected. No fireworks, no victory lap. It was quieter, heavier, a line drawn in the dirt she couldn't cross again. I'd made sure of that, not for spite, but for us, me and Ethan, safe now, whole. She'd threatened regret, hissed it like a curse, but standing there, the cool air on my face, I didn't feel it. I felt free. Morning came soft, sunlight spilling through the kitchen window as I flipped pancakes, the sizzle loud in the stillness. Ethan shuffled in, hair a mess, yawning as he grabbed the syrup. Smells good, he mumbled, and I smirked, sliding a stack onto his plate. Better than motel toast, right? He laughed, a sound that filled the room, and we ate, forks clinking, the day stretching out ahead of us, ours to shape. The phone buzzed once. Tina, checking in, saying the charges were sticking, Lydia's fate sealed, but I let it sit, unanswered. That chapter was closed. We spent the day settling in. Hanging a crooked picture of us at the lake, kicking that soccer ball in the yard till the grass was patchy, laughing till my sides hurt. Ethan's guilt was gone, replaced by a lightness I hadn't seen in months, and mine, well, it was fading, brick by brick, with every moment we stole back. Evening found us on the couch again, some dumb action flick blaring, his head nodding against my shoulder as the credits rolled. I eased him up, guided into his room, the quilt his grandma made pulled tight over him. He stirred, half asleep, and I paused in the doorway, the hall light casting a glow across his face. We don't forget, Ethan, I said, voice low, ruffling his hair with a hand that still felt the fight in it. But we move on. He mumbled something, a sleepy yeah, and I stepped back, closing the door soft, the house whispering its welcome around me. Lydia was a shadow now, fading fast, and ahead, well, ahead was ours, bright and uncharted, waiting for us to claim it. Well, folks, that's the story of how me and Ethan turned the tables, fought back, won big, and took our lives back from the ashes. If you felt your heart pounding in that courtroom, or your fist clench when Lydia got what was coming to her, then you're one of us now, part of this wild ride. Don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next tale I've got brewing. Got a story of your own about justice, revenge, or just making it through? Drop it in the comments or send me a message. I want to hear it, and maybe it'll spark the next chapter. Share this with someone who needs a win today, because we all deserve a shot at turning the tables. Until next time, keep fighting and keep listening. See you soon.